So Dana White has just went live on Instagram to announce the main event and co-main event, the UFC Fight Night Qatar. And the main event is Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. Now, this has been a fight that has been spoke about for a while now, especially on X anyway. A lot of rumours were that this was going to be the main event to UFC Fight Night Qatar. So I'm not that surprised by this fight being announced. The co-main event though, Belal Muhammad versus Ian Garry. Yo, where did this fight come from? Because all the talk was that Ian Garry was going to fight Sean Brady. That was all the stuff that I was hearing online. You had Sean Brady call out Ian Garry a couple of times saying that Ian Garry was ducking him. And now they're in, like, sure, this is kind of, I'm surprised this is the co-main event. Like, this in its own right is its own fight night main event, but I am glad we were getting two back-to-back, high-staked, arguably number one contender fights in the lightweight and welterweight division. Let's quickly go back to the main event, which is Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. Now, we haven't seen Arman Tsarukyan in a very long time off that win against Oliveira at UFC 300. He hasn't fought since. Now, he was meant to fight Islam Makhachev at UFC 311, pulled out due to a back injury. We then realised it's because he wasn't going to make weight. And since then, Arman has been on the sidelines, grappling the likes of an 850-year-old Benson Henderson. I don't know why he was doing shit like that, but Dan Hooker obviously pulled out of the fight with Justin Gaethje. He has had a hand injury. Obviously, it's all healed up now. This is a big matchup in the lightweight division. Look, personally, I think Arman Tsarukyan will win this matchup. Dan Hooker will be tricky for Arman to figure out on the feet. Arman does have pretty good boxing, but Dan Hooker is definitely the far superior striker on the feet. And Dan Hooker actually does have some underrated takedown defense. However, Arman Tsarukyan's level of wrestling, in my opinion, is just going to be too much for Dan Hooker to deal with. I don't think Arman will be able to finish Dan Hooker. Now, Arman does have some really nasty ground and pound. I think he could bust Dan Hooker up. I think it's going to be a really one-sided, dominant win for Arman Tsarukyan. Now, Arman Tsarukyan, we've seen videos of him now floating around social media of him eating these big croissants and kind of just splurging out on all these luxury foods and shit like that. So hopefully Arman doesn't miss weight for this fight, because it is going to come around quickly. I believe it is the 22nd of November. So a month and a bit away. But yeah, Arman Tsarukyan will win this matchup in my opinion. I think he honestly either 4-1s or 5-0s Dan Hooker. I think it's a very one-sided, dominant win for Arman Tsarukyan, and then Arman will go on to fight Ilia Topuria. I think they do Ilia versus Justin next. I think that's the fight they're going to do. I think they might do Max versus Paddy now, because I think they're going to have Topuria headline the first card in Paramount Plus, and Arman Tsarukyan's going to fight in November. He's not going to make that quick of a turnaround unless he knocks out Dan Hooker or subs him in the very first round. I just don't see that happening. So I think Ilia will probably fight someone like Justin Gaethje next, and then Arman in the summer. But let's talk. This is the fight I'm more interested in: Belal Muhammad versus Ian Garry. I think this is going to be a really good matchup. I think Ian Garry is going to surprise a lot of people in there. I thought they were going to do Ian Garry, Sean Brady, and Belal Muhammad versus Kamaru Usman. It's kind of crazy that they haven't went for Belal Muhammad versus Kamaru Usman, because they've already had the rivalry, the podcast, back and forth online, shit like that. So not to do Belal Muhammad Usman seems like a missed opportunity, but this right here is going to be a really fun fight. We've seen that Belal Muhammad, when you have him in a striking matchup, he can deliver fun fights. Look at the JDM matchup. Ian Garry's obviously coming off that win over Carlos Prates. First guy to beat Prates in the UFC. Looked phenomenal for 4 out of the 5 rounds. In the 5th round, came under a bit of trouble with Carlos Prates. Now obviously Belal Muhammad doesn't have the type of punch power and the danger factor of a Carlos Prates on the feet, but Belal Muhammad does have that dominant wrestling background. And this right here will be a good indication on how good Ian Garry's grappling actually is, because we've seen him nearly submit Shavkat Rakhmonov. We've seen him do a very good job of defending Shavkat's takedowns. However, Shavkat works for takedowns through the clinch with like trips and sweeps and stuff like that. Belal Muhammad's more your traditional wrestler, single leg, double leg. So it'll be interesting to see Ian Garry's grappling on display in this matchup. I think Ian Garry wins it, I'm going to be honest. I think Ian Garry shocks a lot of people in here. I think Ian Garry's distance management, the kicks up the middle, the stomps to the knee, the constant changing of stance, it's just going to be a lot for Belal Muhammad to deal with. And Belal Muhammad isn't the most fast striker either. And Belal Muhammad, yes, he is tough and durable, and Ian Garry isn't a massive puncher, but I think Ian Garry will be able to time him well whenever Belal Muhammad's coming in. Belal does have good boxing. Maybe in the boxing range he can cause Ian Garry some problems, but I think he's going to have a really hard time trying to close the distance against Ian Garry. And I think Ian Garry has a very good performance against the former champion in Belal Muhammad and solidifies himself as the next number one contender in the welterweight division. Like, I know a lot of people like to shit on Ian Garry, but the guy is good. There's no denying it. But this is definitely the fight I'm more interested in. Belal Muhammad, Ian Garry. I think Ian Garry wins this by decision. I'm unsure if this is 3 rounds or 5 rounds, so you can let me know in the comments below. But let me know, what do you think of UFC Fight Night Qatar? That oil money is different, because every time they go out to the Middle East, it is stacked upon stacked. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you all again in the next one.